is Mariah Carey the Queen of Christmas? Yes, of course. But in my family, the queen of, I suppose, crafty Christmas is Martha Stewart. Over the years, my mom specifically has made a lot of crafts and recipes inspired by Martha Stewart, and there were several years on and off where Martha Stewart's shows would just be playing in the background. And recently, with the documentary on her coming out, and my mom and I discovering that there's actually like a Martha Stewart channel on Prime that just constantly plays her old episodes, I've been inspired to try to recreate a few of her projects and a couple of her recipes to see how easy and doable they are. So I made 3 DIY holiday projects and 2 holiday recipes. So first up, I saw Martha making these embossed velvet leaves, where she showed a picture where she actually made a wreath with all of these embossed leaves. She didn't teach how to make it, but she showed it. And so I thought that won't be that hard to recreate, right? Like, it looks relatively easy. If you can tell by my facial expression, it was not easy, but let me show you what I did. Hi, hello. This has been such a fun process so far, by which I mean I've not been having fun. I mean, I've kind of been having fun. It's been a lot of challenges. There's been many changes to what this is going to end up being. So first, I thought a great idea would be that instead of doing leaves, because this is Christmas, I would do poinsettias. Poinsettias? I'm going to say poinsettias, but I think the way you pronounce it is poinsettias. Anyway, so I made a little stamp, and it took me forever, and it really hurt my hand because I don't really have like sculpting tools. Like I have sculpting tools, but they're for clay, but I kind of did it. And then I went over to iron and do everything that she said, which was to put fusible interfacing on the back. You put this underneath, you put this on top, and then you iron it. And that is supposed to leave an embossing. And I think she sprayed it with water, and I thought that steaming it, because I have a steam setting on my iron, I thought that would be good enough. It was not good enough. This did not work at all. I mean, it worked like the time. There would always be one little section that got done, but I could not get like the entire thing to actually show up to like any great degree. So then I changed tactics a little bit, and I was like, well, maybe all the lines on here are a little too small. So then I went to the leaf idea. This one turned out much better. I think this would actually make a cool stamp. I'm gonna keep this one. By the way, I'm working on this, like, I don't know what it's called. I'll put like a picture up, and I'll put the link below of what I bought. But this is like an easy, there's harder things that you can sculpt to make a stamp. This is supposed to be like the easiest one that hurts your hand the least. It still hurts your hand, but it's better. So I made a leaf, and I tried it again, and it still didn't work. And by this point, I realized that there probably was a velvet that was better, that either she hadn't mentioned at all or I just hadn't caught. And I think it needs to be a velvet with a deep pile, which means like the little hairs are like longer. And mine are relatively short. I would say this is like, I don't know, I would say this is a pretty short pile. This is a silk velvet ribbon, and I think I looked it up online afterwards and it said it was rayon. That is supposed to be the best for embossing. But by this point, I've spent a lot more money than I wanted to spend on this project. So we're gonna quit while we're ahead. So what I did was I experimented a little bit and I put it away. I'll put another picture up here because I don't feel like going upstairs to get it. They are bleach pens that I don't think have any bleach in them. I think they're just like a laundry detergent solution. There's something in them. It doesn't bleach the velvet, but it does make the pile sit down. Like it kind of crushes it permanently. So that's the best that I can get. It took a long time to do each of these, so I've done them to like half of everything, and that way it will be a nice little combination of textures. I will say, I think it's actually this kind of crinkled velvet actually kind of gives off leafiness to me. So if you don't want to do any of this embossing work, a crinkled velvet I think is just a nice way to just get some nice leafy texture without it being like, that's a leaf, if that makes sense. I have a new glue gun that I did not know would take this long. You have to charge 2 things. You have to charge the battery, and then the battery has to charge the gun. So that's taking forever. I cut 500 million little pieces of wire, and I'm gonna place them on each one. and then we're gonna glue them down, and then we can finally get to actually making the wreath. I don't know if this will be enough. I feel like when I do things like this, I always go under the amount that I actually need, but this is basically all the ribbon I have. I reserved a little bit of the green ribbon for another project in this video, but I just bought like a little 12-inch wreath. So I think this will be enough. It was like a big wreath. I don't think this would be enough. Anything else? I don't think so. So I'm gonna wait for my glue gun to completely charge up, and then we will do the wires, and we'll keep going after that. Hooey! Let's go. So after I finally had all the wire attached with hot glue, I put 5 leaves that were a mixture of the reds and twisted them together to kind of make them look like poinsettias. I wasn't done trying to make my original idea work. Then after adding those all around, I filled in those naked spots left over with the green leaves. I'll talk a little bit more about how I feel about each of the DIY projects now that they are complete and up in my house, but that will be at the end of the video. So for now, let's move on to the first baked good, which is a Linzer crumble with a cranberry raspberry jam filling. Now, if you have never heard of Linzer, it is traditionally a torte that is made with some kind of shortbread-y base and a lattice pattern on top. I think the more popular version here in America is Linzer cookies, where it's usually like 2 shortbread cookies with a cutout and it's filled with jam. This looked really yummy and really pretty. I'm not usually a big cranberry fan, but I was hoping that the raspberry would ease the bitterness out of the cranberry a little bit, but I definitely wanted to give it a try. So you start off by making a really simple jam. In her recipe, you make the jam, but you could definitely buy jam for this. But I will say making jam, in my opinion, is so much easier than it seems. So I put in some cranberries and raspberries, added in a good amount of sugar and a bit of vanilla extract. I also added a bit of cinnamon and nutmeg for added holiday flavor. The recipe says to only cook for 10 minutes, but I like a jammier consistency, so I let it cook on medium for about 30 minutes, stirring occasionally. Okay, so at this point of the recipe, I started messing up a bit. I have not been sleeping well lately, and it's starting to affect me. But I don't think I ruined the recipe. First thing was that I whipped up the butter instead of the butter and sugar together. I added the sugar later, which I do think changed the texture a bit, but not the end of the world. Maybe because of this, it ended up being a bit too dry, so I added a few tablespoons of olive oil because I just didn't have any more room temperature butter on hand. Then I almost forgot the nuts, but added them in just in time. Then I added a third of the crumble mixture and added more butter to the topping. According to the recipe, I was supposed to place the crumble in a lattice pattern to mirror the original Links torte, but I forgot to do that. It would have been great for aesthetics, but you know what? It all ends up in the same place anyway. Now the last thing according to the recipe is after baking it for a few minutes, you take it out and cover it to make sure the inside cooks completely. This was really yummy the first night, and the raspberries definitely did cut down on the bitterness at first, but if you're not a cranberry fan like me, the bitterness did start to seep through much more on the second night. But for my cranberry loving family members, they said this was great, so definitely try it out if you like cranberry too. Next up is another wreath. I tried to add a little bit more variety in my DIY projects, but I kept getting sucked into wreaths. And I think that's because it's probably my favorite thing to decorate with. I think adding it to the back of a door or especially onto your windows is the easiest way to just instantly make your house feel more Christmassy or in the holiday spirit. So I'm kind of obsessed with them, and this one in particular was very inspiring to me. And that is because it used something interesting, which is coffee filters. Now, I know that this kind of gives off like sad beige Christmas, which is definitely not my vibe, but I feel like mixed with my more colorful Christmas decor, I could make it work. I just think it looked really interesting and unique, but really easy to do as well. Okay, so first up, Martha used a straw wreath, which I didn't know they were going to be this expensive. It's like $15 for one. So instead I bought these flat wooden ones, which were about $15 for 6 of them, and I built up a little roundness with some craft paper and hot glue. Then I started folding the coffee filters twice to make these little triangles. Martha talked about creating 3 different layers or levels, but she didn't show it, so I thought she meant to do 1 row at a time on the outside, then the middle, then the inside. I knew I would probably only be able to fit in 2 rows because I'm doing a much smaller wreath, but doing them like this didn't look great, so I quickly figured out the best way to place them, which is to shingle or slightly overlap each triangle over each other. Now toward the end, when you're meeting back to your first filters, the best way I could find to get these few to fit in was to fold that tip over several times to make it a smaller area to glue on, and then place those as close as possible. I ended up making 3 6-inch wreaths, one for each window, on my craft room back wall. Next up is another baked good, and I thought I would choose a quick and easy recipe, and that is zucchini bread, specifically the spiced zucchini bread that I think Martha specifically made for the holidays. I think things like banana bread and zucchini bread are the perfect thing to make during this time of year, especially if you don't have a lot of time. If you are the person that has to bring something to eat to an event, or if you're just trying to give something a little special to maybe your neighbors or the workers in your area, I think these two things are the perfect thing to give. And I really wanted to try the, Christmasified version of a zucchini bread. So zucchini bread starts off by grating a lot of zucchini. After putting the wet ingredients together, here is where you add those classic holiday spices like cinnamon, nutmeg, and ginger. Then instead of cutting up pecans, I crush them with a mallet. It's much faster and tastes exactly the same, of course. This was not a part of the original recipe, but I added a crumble on top by adding room temperature butter, flour, and sugar together. This is my favorite topping for zucchini bread, but you could totally whip up a quick lemony icing. In fact, that might look even prettier if you're going to give this away. We always give little tins of homemade cookies and baked goods to neighbors and such at the end of the year, and I think this would be perfect to cut up into slices and add if you do something like that too. Lastly, I wanted to try one of her DIY stockings. We in this family have not had stockings for years, and I thought the one that I saw was perfect to finally have stockings in our decor again. And she made stockings out of scarves, which I thought gave stockings a little bit of visual interest. I really liked the plaid, but also gave you the chance to make a super oversized, cozy looking stocking. In the video I watched, Martha said there was a free pattern for the stocking on marthastewart.com, but I searched high and low and I couldn't find it. Now, the original video had to have been from about 15 years ago, so that's understandable. I had to go and make my own pattern. And then Ollie wanted up on the chair and then immediately wanted down again. If you have a terrier or just a talkative dog in general, please commiserate with me in the comments. Just like Martha said, I added a few inches to the top of the stocking because the fringe is going to become part of the cuff. My stocking was about 24 inches tall at the shortest part. I really wanted these to be super oversized. I then had enough to make a small Ollie-sized stocking, and of course he had to give his stamp of approval. I then did a simple stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around.
Oh, pretty. Yeah, good selection too.
I then used some leftover fringe pieces for the tabs at the top. Since there was no fringe left over for Ollie, I made some of my own by cutting up some leftovers and attached that at the top of each piece before attaching them. Now, even though my camera refused to cooperate because of the lighting, I am keeping my seams to the outside of the garment, so instead of turning them inside out, I just added a decorative blanket stitch to make it look purposeful. Okay, so since I've already given my thoughts on the baked goods, I'm gonna go ahead and give my final thoughts on the DIY projects. First, we're starting with the velvet leaf wreath. I hate it. It turned out okay. I don't hate the way it looks, but every time I look at it, I just remember how much of a pain it was to make. Also, it was so much more expensive than I even thought it was going to be. I ended up spending well over $40. Like, that is a low ball estimate. I feel like you can buy a wreath at that price and it would look better than the wreath that I made. Oh, that makes me mad. I think if you have a lot of leftover velvet for whatever reason, I think if you have a lot of leftover velvet for whatever reason, this wreath could be worth your time. But for me, having to buy everything, it was definitely not worth my time or my money. But next up is a complete turnaround with the coffee filter wreaths, which are actually right above me. They're just out of frame. I love these. They are so cute and they were so easy to make. I feel like most people could take a stab at this and would be successful. And I feel like it's a cool way, you know, coffee filters are a single-use item, but now these specifically are going to be used for years in my house. I also just think they're really interesting to look at. I don't think they look like coffee filters. I don't know. I just think they look really unique. I like them. And lastly is the stockings. I love these too. They were the quickest and, in my opinion, easiest of the 3 projects, as long as you have basic sewing skills. I think if you don't add in the blanket stitching that I did, it took 30 minutes, I believe, to whip all 3 of those up so fast. They're massively oversized, which is how I like stockings, but you could definitely make them smaller than that. And I think they just are such a statement piece on the mantle. I'm so happy with how they turned out. But overall, I had a really fun time with this video, and I love that this is now decor that I can use year after year. I have a couple of new recipes that I can pull out every year. Just overall very fun and exciting, and I really enjoyed it. That is gonna be it for me this week. If you liked this video, be sure to subscribe and also like and comment. All those things really help me out. I hope you had a good time, and I hope to see you back here very soon. Bye.
It's a good thing. Alexis's chocolate chip cookie for up to 2 weeks. It's a good thing. Long time. But it's a great thing. They're a good thing.
When you say, that's a good thing.
So you're good at
Yeah.